consumer because there are things I can't buy, right? Because we'll see firms that won't make it. Maybe my favorite bread company won't be able to make the bread that I want, and they'll go out of business. Okay, hopefully Coca-Cola won't go out, right? Okay. All right, so with that said, there is another way to look at it. If you had no inflation, right, and a little bit of deflation, there are costs that you won't have to incur. We just looked at a whole list of them. So Milton Friedman had something to say, and it was pretty accurate, right? But on average, a little bit of inflation is really the way we would prefer the economy to act. Okay, so we've finished chapter 7. So we're going to go ahead and jump into chapter 6. Again, we're looking at 7 before 6, and that's okay. All right, just move on to the next outline. All right, and I passed this outline out to you, and it's also on Brightspace. So we're going to switch some gears here a little bit. And again, we'll still look at those problems that we have left on Monday. Okay, but let's go ahead and look at measuring economic activity. Okay, so we start with the basic idea that higher is better, right? And that's absolutely true, right? We want the economy to grow. We want the numbers to be positive, okay? And we essentially measure our economy through GDP, gross domestic product, right? The value of goods and services made here, all right? Doesn't matter who's making them, they're made here, right? They're made in the territorial United States, right? Could be a French company, they're making it here, that counts. Okay, if it's an American company making it somewhere else, it isn't going to count. Okay, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Okay, but we're going to just kind of do a basic introduction with the time we have tonight or tomorrow morning. And we'll get into some of the equations when we get back on Monday. Okay, but let's talk a little bit about really what we're doing when we're measuring GDP, right? Well, we're measuring two things. Number one, total income, all right? But we're also measuring, right? And if you think about it, all right, if you're earning stuff and you're going to buy it, right? Total expenditures, all right? So we're measuring total income, what we've earned, all right? Both as people, firms, etc., all right? And total expenditures. Now, to a certain degree, when it comes to GDP, now, by the way, we do make changes here. Let me go with a little bit of blue here, all right? We're assuming this relationship, right? All right, income basically equals expenditure. So everything we're making, we're running out when we're spending. Okay, so all the money that we're making in the economy, turning right around and buying goods and services with it. Okay, 3 curveballs we have to worry about. Now I want you to know these, right? That cause a little bit of an issue here, and we'll talk later on in this section about some of the adjustments that we have to make. Okay, number one, households don't do this, right? They don't spend everything they make. Okay, some of them save. Okay, now the flip side of this is some households actually spend more than what they make, right? They go into debt. Right? Sometimes it's good debt, such as buying a house, student loan, things like that. If you need a car and you have to get to work, that makes sense. Buying a bunch of fur coats, probably not a good idea. Okay, number 2, we have to pay taxes to the government. So we don't really think about this. Everything we make, we don't turn around and expend because we have to give the government some. Okay, now you might say, well, Tudor, we can just change this to take-home income, right? And then take-home expense. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. All right. And 3, governments also buy and sell goods and services. Okay, so again, we don't spend everything we earn, right? And sometimes we go above that, by the way, so kind of a 1A and 1B. All right, we still have to pay taxes to government, so again, we have, not all of our income is expendable, right? Dispensable, if you will, disposable rather, sorry. All right, and when it comes to expenditures, income and expenditures, governments also buy and sell goods and services. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and break this down, all right, kind of in a pure lecture format, if you will. All right. And again, by the way, we're still looking at Greg Mankiw's stuff. I mean, he's a pretty bright economist, smart guy. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to break down GDP. So essentially, what is it doing? So yeah, we know it's a measuring stick, and we know we want GDP to be good, right? That's a good thing. Okay, but let's go ahead and break it down a little bit. All right, we'll get up here a little bit. Give ourselves some room. Okay, there we go. Kind of got it on there. Okay, market prices. All right, GDP is based on the current. Now notice this is different than what I just told you a little while ago about American accounting, right? The idea is that market prices are market prices. We value things today, right? Now market prices are essentially what people will pay today for goods and services. Right? What will they pay today for goods and services? Okay. Now we also make an assumption, by the way, when it comes to market prices, right? If something is worth twice as much as something else, we assume it's twice as valuable, right? So if good A is $2 and good B is $1, we're assuming good A is actually worth twice as much as good B. And we kind of assume that that value is there too, like it's really worth twice as much. Now, it also tells us, by the way, all right, and this is very important to get down in your notes, right, when it comes to market prices and GDP. Good A contributes twice as much as B does to GDP, all right? Good A contributes twice as much, all right, to GDP as good B. Okay, number 2. GDP is comprehensive, all right, that's an E. Drop it down a little bit. All right, GDP is comprehensive. Okay, now that one means it includes everything that's made here. It includes goods and services. Anything that's produced here. It will also include financial instruments, okay? So one of the curveballs, and we've actually talked about this before, what about housing? Okay, what about housing? All right, well, housing, whether you rent it or own it, we still calculate rent. So if you rent, we get it, all right? Housing would be a service. But let's say you own, we kind of treat it as if you're renting to yourself, right? Just so we can treat things equally. So if you own your house and your house payment is $1,000 a month, we're assuming you're renting it from yourself for $1,000 a month. It's called imputed rent, all right? Not a big deal. Okay, now, are there some exceptions to this idea of comprehensive? Yes, there are. A couple. Number 1, we don't include illegal stuff. Okay, so we're assuming GDP, all right, certainly market prices, right, is comprehensive also in the sense that we're talking about legal goods and services, not illegal. Okay, now the second curveball, again, second exclusion, by the way, is we don't include what's produced at home. Right, vegetables in the garden, that type of thing, clothes you make at home, that kind of thing. We don't include those things that are made and consumed at home. Okay, same thing is true with services produced at home, the third curveball. Okay, again, washing your dog, cleaning your own car, things like that. Okay, so again, 3 things we don't include: stuff that's illegal goods and services, 2 goods that are produced at home, and 3 services at home. Okay, so let's say you fix your own roof, right? That kind of thing. Okay, all right, number 3. We look only at final goods, goods that are done, goods that are complete. Okay, now, that means component parts made in Oregon to be put into cars made in Iowa, those component parts aren't going to be included. The finished car in Iowa will be included, but not the component parts that are made in Oregon. Okay? All right, so again, not component parts. Now, let me throw you a curve, and then by the way, that helps us avoid double counting. Let me throw you a curveball. Let's say the component parts are made in Oregon, and then they're sent to Vietnam for assembly there. Then they would be included, right? They would be included at market price, would be considered comprehensive, and then also final, right, for our purposes, right? Our purposes, they would actually be considered final goods. Okay, and that's, by the way, that's even if the component parts made in Oregon go to Vietnam for assembly in a car, and then the car is actually imported back in the United States. It won't matter, right? The component part for our purposes would still be considered final goods. Okay, number 4. Again, we're just breaking down GDP, trying to see how it's created, right? Both goods and services. All right, both goods and services. Okay, now with that said, when you think about goods, that's pretty easy. They're tangible, right? Diet pop, marker, cell phone, my podium here, that type of thing. That's easy, right? That's easy. Okay, but also services that often aren't tangible, right? A haircut, right? Washing a car, right? A lawyer practicing law, banker practicing trust work, right? That type of thing. Now, also in the mix, all right, goods, services that might be intangible, also intellectual property, all right? So what is included in GDP, very important, and a huge part of the American economy, right? It's true of pretty much the Western countries, but very big in the United States, the value of patents, copyright, trademark, and trade secrets, right? All of those things, okay? All right, now, all right, goods and services that must be produced in the same year that we're measuring GDP. So let's say, for instance, we're measuring GDP for 2018, all right? Okay, we're going to look at all the goods and services produced in 2018, right? So in other words, the sale of a used car, let's say it's a 2002 Chrysler, that's not going to be included, right? It's at Bob's used car lot and you go buy a 2002 Chrysler. That won't be included, right? Services performed in 2017? No. Services performed in 2019? No. Everything has got to be done in 2018 if that's what we're looking at, okay? All right, number 6. Produced in, I kind of gave this one away. Produced in the country. So if we're measuring the United States GDP, it's got to be produced here in the United States, the good or the service. Now, it doesn't matter what the nationality, it doesn't matter the nationality of the company. So let's say it's a French company making yogurt here. That's going to count. But an American company, right, making auto parts in Ukraine isn't going to count. We're worried about the geographic territory in the United States and what is produced here, be it the goods, the intangible services, or intellectual property, right? Kind of intangible goods, patents, copyright, trademark, and trade secrets, okay? Services often become kind of difficult to measure. Let's say the service is being performed in the United States that has an impact somewhere else. So let's say, for instance, I'm working on a patent application here in my office in Ohio, but the patent application is for an Austrian firm that wants protection in Guatemala. Well, it gets a little hairy there. We actually most likely look at the situs, I say, where the actual work is being performed, so it would probably be included here. Okay. All right, now, next time intervals. Okay, still breaking it down, GDP, all right? GDP is generally measured on an annual and a quarterly basis, often sometimes a monthly basis, depends on what you want to use the numbers for, okay? And that, so, you know, this quarter's GDP, this year's GDP, this month's GDP, I'd say quarters and years probably more so what you're going to hear reported. Okay, now, that's all well and good, right? What you want to know is that every time you hear a percentage, right? 4% in quarter 2, for instance. That's an annualized rate. So what economists, statisticians, mathematicians, if you will, have done is they basically calculated what it would be, even though we're only looking at the 3-month period, a quarter, we calculate what it would be on an annualized rate. That way we can kind of standardize things, right? Just makes it a little bit of an easier figure. Kind of takes away the highs and lows you might get by 2 quarters in the same year that might be way off, where, you know, in the first quarter it's -3% and in the second quarter it's 6%. You're like, okay, whatever. So we'll look at annualized figures, and generally we just kind of look at the 4 quarters prior. Okay, so with that said, we're going to go ahead and stop here. We'll pick up with the components of GDP, so like seeing what it is. But here we're just talking about what it describes, all right? And then when we come back on Monday, we'll actually look at the components of GDP, all right? So I'll see you then.